Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for us, for the young RLC campus in Bonn. So this is basically the first talk, the first presentation within the workshop that we have starting from today onwards. And we will have a talk, a presentation from Dr. Hanumappa Sudarshan from India. So he got the award, the RLA award in 1994, sorry. And he's working basically with the Adivasis people in India. And this morning you already heard something about his work already, so maybe you are a little bit familiar with what he's doing, and he will of course present that later on. But I found it very interesting that he started as a medical doctor in India. So very much inspired by Albert Schweitzer ideas and way of working, way of thinking. And he started very early, I think in the 70s or so. 74. And starting with a small hospital, establishing a small hospital in the western Ghats of southern India, in Karnataka state. And from this hospital, he further developed a kind of livelihood approach. So he started with the hospital, then he started with the school, so going up and having a kind of coherent development idea. So when I heard that, it was very interesting because at ZEF we currently do kind of the opposite. That we started 15 years ago as a development research institute, and now we, in some projects at least, we're going in the health direction. So this is another way. But I think it's very interesting for us, and so I think Dr. Sudarshan will present his idea, his work, and his thoughts. Thank you very much.
First of all, I thank the organizers, our college, for giving me this opportunity. Basically, I'm sharing my 31 years of experience of working with the indigenous people. Very quickly, for those who are not familiar with we don't call them indigenous people. In India, the official term is tribal people. We have scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. So we need to understand the scheduled castes are part of the so-called civilized world, and there was a caste hierarchy. And the scheduled castes were oppressed by the upper caste. But the scheduled tribes lived in isolation from the rest of the civilization and lived in the remote forests. And they are not in the caste system. So that's the basic difference between scheduled tribes, the indigenous people in India. They are mostly in central India and northeastern India. We have large tribal, there are about more than 573 tribal communities, but some of them are more than 1 million people, but some are really vanishing primitive tribes. These are the Andaman tribes, Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the southeast of India. They are really 5 tribes, all put them together about 800 people. One Jaravas, the mostly naked tribes, they are about 200 people. I had the unique opportunity of understanding. The government of India wanted me to see whether we need to have health interventions for them, immunization for example. So we debated and finally said no immunization because pulse polio itself can cause some flaccid paralysis and add its own problems. So wait and watch was the final decision taken. So it was a hard decision. The other ones are the Great Andamanis. They were reduced to 24 people. Today there are about 42 people in a separate state island. There's also one more tribal called Sentinels. There are about 100 people in a Sentinel island. We could see them just go around the island, but nobody has landed in the island. 4 years back, 4 people tried to land and they were shot by the poisonous arrows and killed. So far nobody has got into the Sentinel island and seen the Sentinels. I think the present policy is to leave them alone till they want to come to the so-called civilized world. I'm using the word so-called, we don't know. Okay. Now, I started my career in Soliga tribal people. These are one of the South Indian tribes. The Shola in that local language means children of bamboo. They belong to the Vedite group of Aboriginals. There are two theories whether they are pre-Dravidians. The Dravidians are in the South India, they are the most ancient people. So the Dravidians themselves do not want to call the Aboriginals pre-Dravidians, but at least they accept they are early Dravidians. Whatever maybe they are the most Aboriginal people. They were doing shifting, cultivation, food gathering and hunting. Even they have their own social customs. Even now marriages are by elopement. They decide, they disappear into the forest, come back after 2-3 days and declare they are married. But the important is there is no dowry system, which is the greatest malady in the caste system, in the civilized system in India. This is one of the Sholay forests we have. Now this BR Hills is a wildlife sanctuary. Just now it has been declared as a tiger reserve. I will talk about the tiger reserve and its implications. The main culture is living in harmony with nature. I think this is very important. I'll be talking about this because when we say natural resource management and sustainable development, the most important is our lifestyles. And this is what they have. Personally, I also do not know whether God exists. For them, nature itself is God. So they are worshippers of nature. You will see in the next picture, this is a big champak tree. It's a tropical tree with yellow fragrant flowers. This is the most sacred tree for them. It's a 600 years old tree. So they are basically nature worshippers, and they don't have difference between secular and sacred. Everything in nature is sacred. And their philosophy is to take what little you want from nature and give it back to nature. This alienation from nature is very important because most of the mega religions, you might call, the approach is to conquer the nature, and God is more important than the nature. So I think that approach is very, very important. For them, present moment is more important than the past or future, so no story. None of the tribal families store food for the next day. They have to complete it, they have to empty it. They should not store anything. I think it's good, I don't know. People may differ, but I feel it's a very important value. We accumulate too much, that's a problem. Integration of head and heart, feminine and masculine, I'll be talking a little more about that later. There's a big champak tree, it's a Sholay forest. Now, as was said, I had a biography in my 10th standard, the biography of Albert Schweitzer. The way he went to Africa and worked passionately for the tribal communities in Africa inspired me to also become a doctor and work for the poor. I started with curative health services. I mean, we used to get snake bite cases, mauling by bears was quite common. So I used to take care of pneumonias and tuberculosis. We also found that there is the community health problem like epidemics of whooping cough, so it became community health. I wish I had pills for poverty. They were alienated from the natural resources. They didn't have land rights. The shifting cultivation was stopped. Hunting was regulated, so the major sources of livelihood taken away. So there was a lot of poverty. So I wish I had pills for poverty, I didn't have, so I got into the land rights issue. I was in the jail for 2 days fighting for the land rights. Just now I was sharing, after 30 years, just 6 months back, we got land titles for all the tribals living in the BR Hills. It took me 31 years to get their land titles. Somehow the forest department government felt that they should not be given. But it was a hard struggle, and it's now the policy of the government to give the land to indigenous people. Now finally, we were in the midst of a biodiversity, and so sustainable development is very, very important. So it was a gradual evolution. I was not a trained social worker. I went there, I jumped into water, learned swimming as we say. So I went with the curative health to community development, and now sustainable development. It was a gradual evolution. In a way it was good because I went there, lived with the people, and then started understanding the problems and built on it. These are the basic principles of tribal development which I have learned for the last 30 years. Living with the people and understanding their strengths, the traditional knowledge system, and building on it is very, very important. Humility to learn from people. Very often we are arrogant. Even I had that arrogance. Mostly we study Western textbooks, British textbooks in medical school. So we think we know everything. Traditional knowledge, I'll just give an example. The first case of delivery which came to my clinic, I asked her to write down on my obstetric table. She refused. Then I found out from the traditional birth attendant that They deliver only in squatting posture and do not allow the mother to lie down. I thought at that time it was superstition, but over a period now we have enough evidence to show that the squatting posture is the ideal posture for mother to deliver. The gravity helps, the muscles can contract better. Why do you have these obstetric tables? They are more convenient for the doctors and nurses. They don't get back pain. So obviously, so we are now promoting the squatting posture delivery, and I'm very happy to say we hardly had for the last 30 years, this is about 20,000 population, we had about 3 cesarean sections, the rest are all normal deliveries. So it's a very significant thing because some of the cities now it is 20% of the deliveries are by cesarean section. So build on their strengths. Instead of talking about weaknesses, how can we build on the strengths? Respect diversity and no need to bring them to the so-called national mainstream. This unfortunately the Government of India policy is to bring them to the national mainstream and they want to bring them overnight. I think we should, the richness of any nation depends on the diversity. So we have to accept the diversity, respect it, and then plan for their development rather than homogenization and bringing them to so-called national mainstream. So the traditional knowledge system, they have wonderful knowledge of the forest and the environment. In our school we had a competition. They have to go to the forest and pluck the leaf of a plant or tree and write down the name of that in their own dialect. The boy, later on I will be showing that Mada and his friends, they identified 180 plants and trees. They have their names for that. And that boy has become a MSc, master's degree in botany. Only difference I find is he knows all the Latin names for those trees and plants. But they have rich knowledge of the flora and fauna and their uses. They have traditional health practices, which I said, traditional agriculture, the seed conservation, how they have brought the traditional seed varieties, organic, and the 3 types of system of agriculture, which they have been practicing. So in the tribal healthcare, we believe in a comprehensive primary healthcare, preventive, promotive, curative, and rehabilitative services. So we have built on the traditional health system, integrating that into the modern system, and empowering people to manage their own health. The health profile is very interesting. How health is very much related to natural resource management and the environment is very important. Those who are living inside the forest, in the core area of the forest, in the last 30 years, I'm yet to find a colonic cancer, no appendicitis, no ischemic heart disease, which is very, very significant. Whereas people who are totally alienated from the forest, they're thrown out of the forest for various reasons. They have all these problems plus HIV/AIDS. Whereas there is no HIV/AIDS in the people who are living in the core area of the forest. So these are the lifestyle diseases. I think there are risks in living in the forest, mauling by bears, snake bite cases, and others, but it's much safer than walking on the footpaths of Bangalore city, where you never know, you might have an accident. So I think this is very important, that living in the natural environment with least carbon footprints, they lead a very healthy lifestyle. In fact, when we studied the Andaman Nicobar tribe, the Jaravas, most of them had 90/60 blood pressure. Cholesterol was very low, very healthy people, whatever little we could test for them. So they have very healthy lifestyles and healthy health indicators. I started with 6 children in 1981. The next year after I started my clinic, 4 of them become postgraduates. And Jadia has done his master's degree in agriculture. He did his thesis on the traditional agricultural practices of the Soliga tribal people. He's assistant professor in a forestry college. Now we have a school with 500 children, and there's also nursing school. Many things, these are the school. We made innovations. We had to fight with the government. They wanted to push the mainstream education on the tribals. Almost took us 15 years to fight and say they should have their own, they should study in their own language, in their dialect, and it should be Soliga culture specific, and it should be about BRLC environment. Finally, we have succeeded in getting this textbook officially recognized by the government education department, and this gradually merges with the local language. We have made some innovations in experiential learning, environmental education. We have a very strong emphasis, value-based education. This was the first batch of tribal nurses. The mainstream nurses would never stay in the tribal interior places. So we trained 7th pass girls as tribal nurses. We have now a 20-bedded hospital with all the facilities. So we believe in preventive, promotive, curative and rehabilitative services with which the healthcare which provides with equity to everybody. We have mobile medical units which goes around the tribal hamlets and takes care of all the important health problems. As I said, integrating traditional knowledge is also important. Delivering in sitting posture and herbal remedies are also very important. They also suffer from sickle cell anemia like the blacks in Central Africa and also in US. The only indigenous people have sickle cell anemia in India. So we take care of that problem also. The tribal girls, the school health. This is a typical primary health center. We now run about 50 primary health centers. It will have a primary health center caters to 20,000 people in hilly and tribal areas with sub-centers, male health, female workers and the village level health worker and provide all the basic health, primary health care. There is health promotion, street theatre to empower them. Community planning and monitoring. Every village plans for their own health and also monitor the services provided to them. These are the community participation, community planning and monitoring exercises. Now, India has got satellite. We are also using for defense. The challenge was, can it be used for the health of the primary health care in remote areas? The satellite connectivity has been given to us from the Indian Space Research Organization, and we have been made to. This is a remote primary health center. We have a digital ECG. We can take an ECG and get a cardiologist report from Bangalore. We can scan an X-ray and get a radiologist report. Tremendous possibilities. We can do video conferencing. The same satellite connectivity is used for village resource center, for watershed development or other sustainable for natural resource management. Very quickly, we have shown that in the primary healthcare, if we have about 20 varieties of herbs, we can manage 25% of the primary healthcare problems. So this is a simple Adathoda Vasaka, the second one on the below. We have dispensed with all cough syrups. The usual Benadryl, Corex, all these cough syrups, my definition of that is they are colorful bottles with 4 to 5% alcohol, sugary syrup with few paise worth of antihistamine. That's the definition of a cough syrup. So instead of that, you boil 2 leaves of Adathoda Vasaka, they are as good as any other multinational companies manufactured cough syrups. So there are many such herbs which they can grow, which will also preserve the environment. At the same time takes care of about 25 to 30% of the primary healthcare problems. We have tried how to grow them, how to use them, not only in their own homes, they can have 4 to 5 herbs, but also wherever there are common lands available, maybe in a temple, maybe in a, wherever common land is available, they grow these herbs in those, in the schools, in the temples and all that, they do it. So we have done this in about 24 primary health centers. Now we're expanding to other areas. I have too many slides, so I'm making fast. These slides will be available to you. You can always copy it and take it with you. These are the demonstration, training and orientation program for them. So we have found that in the first year, people opted 5 to 6% only. Now they are convinced about 25% of the primary healthcare problems are done. Now, this type of primary healthcare approach, the cost effectiveness is very important, and especially the Westerners are shocked at this. Our cost of providing good primary healthcare for about, as I said, a unit of 20,000 people per person is 100 rupees, $2.50. We are able to provide good primary healthcare, which includes curative services, all the malaria, tuberculosis, mother and child health, all components are covered with just 100 rupees. That's $200 per person per year. I think that's probably the lowest in the world. Maybe some people are still spending, but you can provide. Probably if you increase it to about another 50 rupees, another $1, we can provide much better health care. So traditional medicine is, again, it doesn't cost. People can grow herbs and use them. But appropriate health technology is very important. As you know, the problem in the developing countries is and also the research which goes into it. We call it 90-10 divide. The 90% of the health research money goes into the diseases of the rich. Only 10% money is spent on the diseases of the poor, which is unfortunate. So, but still some great technologies have changed the lives of the poor people. One such is, when I was a medical student, the intraocular lens in India, we had to import. It would cost about 10,000 rupees, which was quite a huge amount. Today, we are able to manufacture intraocular lens in India for just $2. $2 you get an intraocular lens, and you can do intraocular surgery for about $20. Much better health outcomes, and we also have community health insurance, where with about 30 cents as the premium, we can provide primary health care. We have tribal women self-help groups. We use the microcredit, but microcredit and for income generation activities, including health. This is not the Bangladesh model, but improvised system of the women self-help groups. This is the women processing the natural wild honey from the forest. There is a weed called lantana which has come, so we make furniture out of that weed. Am I too fast?
No, he's asking about the light.
Oh, can you switch out the slides?
Yeah.
Switch off.
Yeah.
Please stop me and ask if there is any, and if I am fast also tell me. Community organization is important. We have village level, taluka and district level. We have in India a panchayat raj system, decentralized democratic system. For the first time, tribals are getting elected to this panchayat raj system and able to voice their own problems and issues. As I said, Soligas got their land, and now we are fighting for the community rights or the minor forest produce, which it probably in another month we will be able to get that. So they plan, need-based planning is done by the tribal groups. There used to be a lot of land alienation and exploitation which has been stopped. This is the community organization group which was demonstrating on the land rights. Livelihood security, and my personal thesis is we are in the wildlife sanctuary. The tribal people, especially the indigenous people, living in 540 square kilometers, about 30,000 people, their livelihood security and biodiversity conservation can go together. When one of the tribal chieftains were told by the forest department, you will have to shift from this area to conserve the wildlife, the response of the chieftain was, we always live together. Sometimes they used to kill us, and some we also kill and eat. So we are in harmony. Why do you want to displace us? That's his answer. I think he is right. So they have been living, and they can continue to live in harmony and have their livelihood security and biodiversity. This is, I'm passionate about it, trying to convince, and we have a research organization called ATRI, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology. We are also looking at the impact on the biodiversity. They collect minor forest produce. 50% of the tribals depend on these minor forest produce like honey, gooseberries and other herbal medicines. And we have 10 years of data to show that people are not exploiting the correction, over-harvesting, and they are doing sustainable harvesting. So value addition to the minor forest produce is also important. So development and environment. First of all, now the entire BRS now is called organic farming. We made a mistake, the development agencies, the government. I've seen 30 years ago that the government of Karnataka decided that tribals should stop their traditional farming and they should get into modern farming. Chemical fertilizers, pesticides were, sprayers were distributed to them. Fortunately, they had no trust, they didn't use it. So somebody else took it, paying them some money. And now the realization has come that their farming is the best method, and they have this traditional seed conservation and sustainable agriculture is being now promoted. We also alternate sources of energy, solar lighting, solar water heaters, solar cookers, wind energy. When the President of India, Abdul Kalam, he visited us before he became the President later, and he suggested that why don't we have carbon credit scheme for the tribals? For two reasons. One, for preserving the rainforests. I think for maintaining and preserving is also they have to get carbon credits. And also afforestation, where degraded forests are there, they do afforestation, they should get carbon credits and companies should buy them. This is still to be materialized in the Indian situation. A lot of work has gone into it. Hopefully it will happen very soon. The biogas concept and wood gasifiers using the weeds is also one area. Microelectric projects are also picking up in India. This is one traditional ragi, a cereal, which is much better than the rice. The whole grain is used and rich nutrients, better protein and calcium than the rice. Now, in India also we have very progressive acts for conserving the forests, and we have the Forest Act, which British have started, and we have modified it. We have the Wildlife Act, we have the Biodiversity Act, three powerful acts. But unfortunately, in all of those acts, the indigenous people are at the receiving end. They were subjugated. They were not. Their rights were not looked at all. And even the rights of the minor forest produce was not considered by any of those earlier acts. And especially when it is declared as a tiger reserve, the displacement of tribals was systematically planned. They were displaced. Fortunately, we have all been fighting for this Tribal Forest Rights Act, which came into being in 2006. This is the act which starts by saying, for the historical injustice done to the indigenous people, for the tribal people, this act is promulgated. I think that's a great historical moment for me, who has worked with the indigenous people. And this Forest Rights Act, through that, again, although the act came in 2006, only 6 months back we got the land rights for that. Now, when you look at the causes of deforestation in the BRT Wildlife Sanctuary, in the midst of the biological hotspots, when Australia and when Morris came and started cut down all the evergreen forests and planted coffee. And today it's owned by Birlas, another capitalist in India. And the problem is use tons and tons of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and while pulping the coffee, they all pollute the streams, and which affects both the wildlife and the tribal people. During the early period, a lot of clear felling was done for railway sleepers, the wood used for railways, bad management of forests. Earlier, our forest schools would teach the foresters how to exploit the natural resources. That was the concept, how to get more money. But things have changed now. Last 10 years, there's more talk about the foresters are trying to conserve the forests. So they did bad management like clear felling, and then plant monocultures like silver oak and others, or teak. Management of forest fires was very poor, smuggling, poaching. This is one, Veerappan was a very dacoit type of person who would smuggle sandalwood and also poach elephants. He had become almost indispensable. He was a very powerful person. Later on, the police, the forest department, and the politicians joined. Finally, he has been eliminated. We also have poor intersectoral coordination, which leads into deforestation. Corruption is a major problem in the forest department. We have the Maoists and the Naxalite problem, where they indiscriminately destroy the environment, they cut down the trees. We have big dams and the hydroelectric projects. So the contribution of the tribals themselves for deforestation is nothing. What they need for their livelihood has probably contributed hardly 0.5% of the deforestation, or nothing. Now, so tribals actively participate in the biodiversity conservation. So our argument is that don't think of displacing them, use them in the management, in the planning, in implementation, monitoring, and even in research in the conservation. So local governance, we have the Panchayat Raj system, village forest committees have been formed, and they also have taking active part in the conservation. Community patrolling for prevention of forest fires, poaching and smuggling. Conservation of endangered and threatened and rare flora and fauna, they are taking active part in that. Awareness about conservation leading to action, like we are making BR Hills a plastic-free village now, the organic BR Hills. Promoting traditional knowledge in conservation, like conserving sacred groves. Conservation education, forestry school, short-term courses, internships. Ecotourism for tribal development. I will be talking a little more about that. Recently, this was declared. Our tiger population have increased. We are supposed to be having now about 52 tigers. So the government wants to declare it as a tiger reserve. But I am opposed to it. I feel when you look, the whole development has to be looked in an integrated way. I entered with a concept of curative health, and I changed. Similarly, we have in the health, there's too much focus in India on the particular disease called polio, pulse polio. A lot of money comes into it. So everybody is after that, and the regular other immunizations suffer. So that's the problem. Tiger reserve, the other animals and the other flora and fauna are neglected. So I'm saying integrated biodiversity conservation, and we have shown in BR Hills with that approach the tiger population also improves. There is no need to have one vertical program. Tiger reserve also means WWF and other people putting a lot of money, more money and more corruption. And if you want tiger reserve, let us have community-based approach. There is no need for displacement. Unfortunately, with the tiger reserve, the environmentalists who are staunch tiger conservationists, they think people and tigers can never go together. So they want the tribals to be displaced. I personally feel involve them, a community-based approach, and we are finally winning the struggle to convince the government, and they are in the process of approving a community-based approach for tiger conservation. There are also myths about population explosion. India has 1.22 billion population, but indigenous people are only 8%. Now already in South India, population stabilization has happened. In Kerala state, we have negative growth now. So other states have a stabilized population. So answer is not what one of our Prime Ministers, Sanjay Gandhi, he declared emergency, and that was the time he would catch all the young women and do sterilization, forced sterilizations. So that's not the answer. What they are saying is, with good primary health care, convince the parents, the mother especially, that 2 children born to her will not die of acute respiratory infection or diarrheal disease, which is a number, these are the 2 diseases which kill the infant, which is the infant mortality rate because of these 2 illnesses. So provide good primary health care. Then automatically people will come and demand for the family planning services. So that's a challenge, and instead of that, you don't provide a primary health care and just catch them and do sterilization is not the solution. So the population explosion and all the myth about the environmental impact is it's too much blown out of proportion. What we need is put the right thing first, that's primary health care, automatically population stabilization will happen. We also have a technology resource center for organic farming and other alternate cost-effective rural buildings, sanitation, drinking water. So we have a wildlife sanctuary, and a lot of these big Taj group, hotel groups, they were all thinking of starting tourism there. So instead of that, we have some restrictions in doing in the within the wildlife sanctuary. So we use that opportunity, and through a social enterprise, all the profits will go to the tribal development for their health, education and livelihoods. And this is the wildlife sanctuary which I am talking about. It's a junction of eastern and western Ghats, and rich flora and fauna, and very important biological hotspots. We have tigers, leopards, bisons, the elephants. So we are saying the benefits will be for all the people. The guests will have a good experience. The Soligas will get their local. There are 30 people employed in this, and also the money is spent on health, education, and livelihoods. We also say 2 ranges of a conservation also will take up. So the land, the people, and the wildlife all will get the benefit. The Soligas, the ecosystem, the tourists, and the VGKK is the local organization. All of them will be the beneficiaries. This is the reception of the ecotourism project. These are the cottages which we have built, and totally managed by the tribals. Only the management people, we have just started new, so some inputs from outside, but over a period it will be managed completely by the Soliga tribal people. The health system in India is high-tech. We have PET scans and MRIs and all sorts of transplant, but basic healthcare, if you have a small laboratory with a microscope in primary health centers, we can diagnose the malaria, tuberculosis, leprosy, anemia. But unfortunately, even that is not there. But at the same time, we have PET scans and we can do transplants, we can boast of. And we also now talk about the health tourism. People come from Europe are coming and getting operated in India. This is the 2 Indias which we see. We have both public and private healthcare providers. Still, private healthcare providers play an important role, but their costs are very high. The out-of-pocket expenditure for the poor is very high. And we have very low health budget. We spend 0.9% of GDP on health. It has been just increased about 1.4, whereas most of the developed nations spend about 4 to 5% of GDP on health. So the neglect of traditional system was also one of the things. The new concept which I have also been working on the last 15 years is the public-private partnership. That's we work in very remote areas, but the government also has its system and we are duplicating. We were trying to get grants and begging money and running it. So I sat with the health secretary and discussed why don't we partner. So this is how the concept of public-private partnership. So they hand over the primary health centers which they are unable to manage in remote, inaccessible areas, and they provide, some states provide 90% or 100% of what they are spending, and we provide healthcare in all these states. So we have shown that the IMR, infant mortality rate, which used to be 75, out of 1,000 children, 75 would die. Now it has stabilized to about 28. This year, now it is further reduced to about nearly 20. So it's safer to be born in BR Hills than in Bangalore, or in our remote primary health centers than in Bangalore city. So that's what we are showing. We can provide with the same money much better healthcare. I also work in Northeast. They invited me, you can show it in southern Karnataka, which is a progressive state, but you also have to show it in remote Northeast and central India. This is Arunachal tribe, the Nishi tribe, very aggressive tribes compared to Sholigas. These are some of the other Arunachal Pradesh, which is bordering China and Burma. This was one of the primary health centers where I had to walk 12 kilometers up and down, totally 24 kilometers that day. And now there is no electricity, no telephone connectivity, cell phones do not work. It's thinly populated, the population density is very low. This is Waka, where we have insurgency problem. That is, the Nagas want a greater Nagaland, and there is an underground insurgency. All the government officials have to pay 15% of their salary to them as parallel tax. So they asked us also to pay. We refused. We are a NGO, we cannot do that. And now they are happy. They say, you open more primary health centers, we don't need your 15%. So we work in Maoist area, in insurgency area, and also in the Veerappan area where it was notorious Lakai. These are the type of infrastructure we have in the primary health center. This doctor, his wife was a laboratory technician, and they had a child, and we didn't have a quarters for the doctor to live. We had just built attached hut. He lived in that hut for 2 years. I myself lived in this BR Hills without infrastructure for almost 12 years in attached hut. I could convince him, and we have a very committed team. 2 of our primary health centers, the streams are very fast, and the ferries cannot cross, so they cross on the elephants. Very difficult terrains. This is one of the villages in, again, Northeast. During the rainy season, they are totally cut off. The army has a ropeway. This auxiliary nurse midwife is using the ropeway with the vaccine carrier to go and immunize people in very remote and inaccessible areas. We have very really committed staff taking care of them. So now we work in Arunachal Pradesh. Just started in Manipur on 1st of last month, and then we also are working in Meghalaya, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, and mostly the eastern part of India. And we will be scaling it up. We impact about more than 1 million people. We are expanding to those another 5 states, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Bihar. So this is a coverage of various indigenous people in the 5 states. So what's the lessons we learned from the indigenous people? Again, I'm repeating. So living in harmony with nature, that lifestyle is very, very important. When they cut a tree, they have an obligation to plant 1 more tree. And everything is sacred. Morning, get up, worship the sun. And it was very important for me in the school. In my school, when they talked about the sun, it was a burning mass of hydrogen. That's what the science teacher taught me. But what we are trying to give in our education system is that the tribals believe that the sun is the ultimate source of all energy. When they pray to the sun, they know intuitively that the solar energy is what sustains our life. And that's true. So you should teach the science. That's through the photosynthesis, the solar energy is captured by the plants, and that same energy is released in our metabolism. And it is true. What they intuitively understood is what the science also understands. But the way we teach is very important. So we teach that type of education. So the least carbon footprints are by the tribal lifestyles. Probably their livelihood leaves whereas all of us leave huge carbon footprints. So I think those who are talking about conservation sustainable development, we also should follow those lifestyles. I think ultimately it's the integration of the head and heart, the feminine and masculine. It's the conservation and development we have to match. I think development, not at the cost of looting the natural resources, as it is happening in some parts of India, the mining, the big dams, but also looking at development. We may not grow at 8%, which India is doing. Even if it is little less, doesn't matter, but we must look at natural resource management. But unfortunately, things in the country are, we are all obsessed with the idea of economic development, 8% growth. They want to make it 10% like next year. But at the same time, we all know that in spite of the economic growth, the percolation theory, the development, the money which is made there is not percolating down to the poor. So we need to really seriously think about our development model.
Sorry, could you come to an end? Okay,
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Great.
So we are open for questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sudarshan. So this was more than 30 years of work in 40 minutes on time. So many different topics. And I think the workshop participants can later on or tomorrow, the day after, want to discuss on that even more in detail. So therefore, I would like the ones who are not participating in the workshop maybe to raise their hands when they have questions, because maybe they won't have the opportunity later on to talk to doctors and that much more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I like especially what you said about renewable energy and integrating sun, solar energy into that. I'm working in this field also, and I'm just interested in your experience. What are the direct effects of integrating renewable energy by microhydro or by wind? I mean, they do not just save money for conventional fuels like kerosene, but what else do you observe in people for development by going for renewable energy?
No, in India, I think there are a lot of efforts for renewable energy, especially solar. The initial investment is higher, but in the remote inaccessible areas, we have no choice. Also, we have restrictions under the Forest Act. We can't take electricity lines into the interior villages. I think that's where the renewable energy can, so instead of cutting the forest and taking the huge high tension wires inside, I think renewable energy can really make, and they are used to it. They have survived for 3,000 years with that type of energy. So it has tremendous relevance. Yeah. I know the postprandial after such a big meal. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to get your comment that while the traditional people continue growing and growing, what will happen, or what do you think the relation between nature and tribal people will be like after 20 years? Do you think it will continue harmonious, or
as I said, now their population is getting stabilized already. There is no population growth is not the type of population explosion we are talking about is not happening. Because as I said, because of the good primary health care, convince the mother the 2 children will not die of acute respiratory infection or diarrheal disease. So they are sensible. They are requesting for family planning themselves. So the population explosion is not a big problem. The cultural erosion of the homogenization, and when the rest of the world, the so-called civilized world, the impacts on the tribal culture is very important. I know we can't prevent Coca-Cola getting into BRLs now. So those globalization, homogenization processes are coming there. But what we have the advantage in the school is try to stress the core values of the tribal culture that has made them survive. Like the culture of, there are people who had land now, of course all of them, those who grow food, they have a harvest festival and they sing, dance the whole night, and next day headloads of food is given to everybody. They share it. Nobody is allowed to die of starvation. So there are some core values like that, including the nature worship. So I think in the education system also, if you strengthen the roots with those core culture and try make them that's what has made them survive. And also the natural resource management in a sustainable way is also for their livelihood. definitely the tribals will continue. I mean, they have a choice, they can migrate. So far, all those who are educated in the school are come back to the community and working for the community. But I don't know how long it will last. There are forces which will definitely alienate them from their culture. But it has happened. I know of one in Nilgiris, one Thoda type of, that's one tribal community which has the polyandry system. The one woman having several husbands. And she came to Germany for studies, and after that she now feels going back to the community and finding the roots and trying to work for their own community. So it may happen. Some people have to learn the hard way. But if in the education system, if you can stress the core culture of the tribal, what has made them survive, the richness of their culture, that's what the Jadegoda, who is the president of our organization, the first tribal who he is proud of his culture. In spite of studying in Bangalore and master's degree, he feels passionately and he is back and working for the community. I think they themselves, ultimately it is self-determination, you can't force anything, but give the opportunity in their education system that they have a unique feeling pride about their own cultural heritage is very, very important.
Some more? Yes, please.
You said there was a nice historical basis that they were distrustful of pesticide fertilizers, and so they didn't initially adopt that. They also didn't lose their traditional knowledge about medicines. And I assume that facilitated programs to promote those kinds of things. So, in addition to just facilitating the conservation of them, have you also promoted them, the advancement of the traditional medicine to make it more effective, documented, transparent, hygienic, and the organic agriculture to make it more productive within the constraints of
Yeah, that's exactly, JDI is working on more the agriculture, the organic, traditional agriculture, how to improve the productivity to a certain extent. Again, in the modern agriculture, the production is the obsession. For the tribals I have seen, they are inside the wildlife sanctuary, they grow ragi, and one elephant will come and destroy it, probably the 1/4 of his field. I looked at it, so why do you, he knows that elephant may come and destroy the crops and still they do it. See, for them, it's the productivity is not important. The participation in the whole process of cultivation is important. The whole night they keep a vigil on the top of a tree. They make a small machan, we call it, and whole night they beat drums and drive away the elephants. They do that, but it may not be in terms of agriculture economist's perspective. Their productivity is very low, but for him, if he doesn't do that, he is a frustrated man. Psychologically, he is not there. So for him, first of all, doing agriculture, participating in this whole productivity, the whole process of cultivation is important. Otherwise, he will become insane. But also how best we can improve. Now we are trying to have the battery-operated electrical fencing all around. Elephant-proof trenches are made. So the productivity is important, but I think the obsession with the modern market forces economy is the productivity for everything. Growth, everything is growth oriented. I think we need to be careful about that. We need food. I know, but in India, we know the losses which we are incurring. We have too much production of wheat this year, and we don't know how to store. A lot of the food is getting stored, and that's not reaching the people who are starving. So there are also other issues. So productivity is not the one issue. Similarly in health, again I say, I'm not romanticizing traditional health. I will not say they will be able to manage all the healthcare. As I said, about 25% of the common ailments and some health problems can be reduced. But we do need intervention. But what I'm saying is build on the existing one. Don't replace it with a modern. Everything you have is not good, so I'm going with something great. I think build on the existing, whatever good is in them, build on that. That's the approach.
Yes, please.
So my question is about this primary healthcare. Just now in India you have this primary healthcare in the south, and then you're expanding to the northeast.
Yeah.
So you're depending on government funds and aids from other countries.
Yeah.
But in the near future, like how do you plan to sustain that primary healthcare program?
Yeah. Now 90% of our funding comes from the government. I feel it's taxpayers' money which is being wasted. One of our own Prime Minister in India said, only 15 cents of the dollar reaches the poor. So instead of that, we are trying to make the 100% reach the poor. So it's a taxpayers' money and we have a right, and we as civil society also have to get the government money and do it. But at the same time, there are some limitations to that they don't give any management costs, the training, capacity building is not there, so we add a little value to that. Now, this is the social enterprise concept. I am also a Ashoka Fellow, where there are a lot of concept of social enterprises are coming. That's a non-profit. We also earn like a business model, but at the same time, the profit should all go to the local community. So that's one is the ecotourism. Similarly, health insurance mechanism, which will be self-sustaining. So once we have this ecotourism full-fledged, I think we don't have to beg money or raise donations. We will be able to manage the entire development of the people through the social enterprise. That's how we are making it sustainable.
So are there more questions? If not, we will thank you very much.